This is Mario Andretti, and you're listening to Fascination Street podcast.
AV in your ears, that's Ambush being giving you this audio visual down the most interesting street in the world with my boy Steve, Fascination Street. You already know, let's get it when you whip in the Fascination Street. What do you...
Welcome back, Streetwalkers. Christopher Maher is a former Navy SEAL who went through a lot growing up. He had some unimaginable tragedies and situations that he had to deal with, emotionally, physically. We talk about some of those things. We also talk about what he decided to do after he got out of the SEALs. He decided to study, wait for it, traditional Chinese medical practices. That way he can better understand how stress affects his life and other people's lives, and how the body and the mind will help tell you things that maybe the mouth won't. This is a riveting conversation. Chris is very open. He's very honest. He doesn't hold anything back. He tells some pretty remarkably personal stories about growing up and the people and the places that he grew up in and around. We also talk about true body intelligence and what that means. You'll have to stay tuned because I'm not going to tell you right now, and I promise you're going to want to know. We also talk about what does it mean to be free for life and how important that is in the journey to live a stress-free and hopefully happy and fulfilling life. We also talk about his book of the same name, Free for Life, and what that entails, what's the book about, where to get it, and why you should be reading it or listening to it. I'm sure he's going to come back in a few months, so make sure you are paying attention and keeping your eyes and your ears out for his return visit, which I'm very excited about. You'll hear us talking about a potential return towards the end of the episode, and that was no BS, my friends. And this is my conversation with former Navy SEAL, current traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, and super open and honest guy, Christopher Maher.
Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Chris Maher. How you doing today, man?
I'm good, buddy. You got my name right. You're the first person.
Yay, me! Chris, what I like to do is I like to start out from the beginning. It helps us understand how the guests got to where they are from where they were. So if you don't mind, where were you born and raised, man? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Philadelphia, stayed there till I was about 4 years old, and then I moved up to the coal regions of Pennsylvania. And then after my mother passed, when I was 7, I went over to Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and then my grandmother got custody of me and my brother after we bounced around in foster care for a while, and she sent us up to Hershey, Pennsylvania. So I spent the majority of my time from 7 until 17 in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Okay, lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Feel free to not answer anything you don't want to answer, and I'll cut it out.
Okay.
What happened to your mom? And by the way, I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. My mother was stressed. She didn't have a lot of support. She was frustrated, angry. She could flip from Tinkerbell to Godzilla in 2.2 seconds. I think she was struggling with some alcohol use and some marijuana use. And she had been someone who had her sexual boundaries broken. And there wasn't the kind of support and assistance that she needed to get in order to feel safe. And she was institutionalized shortly afterwards, and they gave her electric shock therapy. And after that, I don't think she was ever the same.
All of that sounds like she might have had a hand in her own passing.
Yes. Yeah. She took her own life. She was very organized and very caring in a sense that she set it all up so that after she passed, my brother and I would be taken care of.
How did you end up in the foster care system?
My grandmother's husband at the time was not into the idea of raising my brother and I.
Gotcha.
And so my grandmother really had her hands put to the fire. And I think if I look back, it was probably a non-negotiable conversation.
Given that time period, I'm going to assume that as well. Women
Yeah.
didn't really have a whole lot of say in things until
Yeah.
super recently.
Yeah. So my grandmother followed suit. And I remember my Uncle Eddie, I was very upset. And he came out to meet me behind this like old, like 1954 truck. And he said, "Hey, look, I got to tell you this, but I want you to know in 3 days, you're going to be going into foster care." And he broke the news to me. And, when you're 7 years old, you don't really understand what they're talking about.
Right. Sure.
And then, when the door opened to the foster home that I went into, there was a guy sitting cross-legged. His name's Charlie, facing the wall. And every 6 seconds, he's going bang, smashing his forehead into the wall and then rocking back and then smashing his forehead into the wall. And I'm thinking, I'm looking up towards heaven like, what have I got myself into? And the reality is those people were very kind. They were very loving. They were very generous. And I was actually having a nice time. And it was actually a good space for me. And so in retrospect, obviously, I'm very grateful for the time and the energy and the safe environment that they set up for me. And then I went off to boarding school in Hershey, Pennsylvania, a school named Milton Hershey School. And there, if I had my druthers and my choice to be able to go back and make a decision, I would convince my grandmother to leave me in foster care.
Wow.
Because I went to boarding school, and in the boarding school, of course, you've got all these kids that are coming together. There's not enough staff in order to manage 16 boys in one student home. So I had 2 house parents for 16 boys. There's not enough love, affection, care to go around and manage 16 boys. I mean, imagine your mom and dad managing you plus 15 siblings.
Yeah. Wow.
And I needed more love. I needed more care. I needed more affection. I need someone to have a personal interest in how my day was. And when you're going to boarding school, no one has a personal interest in your day and how you're doing. They have a merit system set in place, and you're being judged based on your performance, right? So performance becomes a big deal. If you perform well, we'll give you extra privileges. And if you perform poorly because you have emotional challenges that aren't being dealt with or met, then we're going to punish you. And so that was not a good dynamic for me, right? That caused me to be performance driven and to not understand the importance of being and be solely focused on doing.
That makes sense. I want to go back to something that you said when you walked into that foster home the very first time and you looked up at the heavens and you said, "What did I get myself into?" That phrase makes me think that at that time you felt like you had a hand in that. Did you think any of that was your fault?
I mean, at that age, when I think about the feelings and thoughts that I was having at night before I was falling asleep, there was definitely some level of guilt, some level of blame, some level of responsibility. Because before my mother went and took her life, she told me to sit here on the couch and she gave me a bag of Jolly Ranchers because she knew I loved candy, right? And she goes, "Look, if I don't return by this time, I want you to go down to Peggy McElhenney's house and I want you to knock on the door and let her know that something's happened to me."
And at that time, were you in charge of your brother? Was he with you?
Yeah, I was in charge of my brother at the same time. So that whole set of events set me up to feel like I was complicit and participating at an unconscious or subconscious level. Obviously, my mind at that age is still in a precognitive state and to understand the entire experience. Yet ultimately, I know for sure that had an impact on me. In fact, you're the first person to ever ask that question.
Well, I'm awesome. The feelings that you're describing there, where you felt a little bit complicit in those things, it kind of reminds me, obviously not equally, but it reminds me sort of like a getaway driver for a bank robbery, right? So like, if we don't come back out of this bank, you take your brother and get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
And in that way, I could see how you would feel like, that is complicity, or at least in a 7-year-old's mind.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been different if I was in bed And I woke up in the morning and Peggy McElhenney knocked on my door and said, "Hey, look, I got bad news." But my mom forced me to participate.
She charged you
Yes.
with these duties to carry out.
Yeah. And she gave me a Bible. Okay. And in the Bible, she had underlined very specific Psalms and Proverbs chapters and statements. And she circled things. And these are the things that she wanted me to know.
Do you still have it?
I do not have the Bible. When I was in college, I left. And when I left a bunch of my stuff. I just moved on. And that was one of the things that was left.
Got you.
But I do remember, because when I was in boarding school, I had the Bible, and my way of connecting to my mother was to flip through the pages, go to Psalms and Proverbs and read those things. And what she was attempting to tell me is that the reason why she was so strict with me, and the reason why she used a switch and was physically abusive, is because she wanted me to grow up and be able to do the right things. And I think that in Psalms and Proverbs that they were making some good points. I think because of my mom's level of trauma and stress, she took things too literally. You can imagine, right? You have a 13-year-old girl. She's been raped, and her emotional growth is stunted, right? She stops maturing emotionally, and she starts looking through the world through a very foggy lens. And there were definite aspects of my mom that were not in reality. I mean, she's 29 and she took her life, right? It's unusual for women to take their lives. It's much more common for men.
Especially mothers.
Yeah.
It's super unusual for mothers to abandon their children in any capacity.
Yeah. So imagine how much she had already abandoned herself, right? How abandoned she felt when she said to her mom, "Hey, this happened to me." And her mom says to her, "Hey, Patsy, this is what men are like," rather than, "Honey, let me console you. Let me share you a little bit of my trauma and the things that I went through." And so I think my mom felt alone. Imagine being in a psych ward. You're receiving electric shock therapy, which means now you're being punished for being the one who was raped. So I guarantee you that she chose to abandon herself because there was no other choice.
Well, if that is what she's being told that the rest of her life is going to be like, what reason does she have to stick around?
Yeah, right.
Oh, so sorry. Chris, it sounds like stress and trauma has been really important in forming who you are.
Yeah, it's been instrumental. It's informed me on how to be. It's informed me on what direction to go. It's informed me on how to feel and think, how to perceive, how to act.
Do you think that informing gets lost on the vast majority of people today?
I think if you're willing to ignore the signs and symptoms and you're focused on stress ignorance, absolutely correct.
Where was your brother while you were at the Hershey boarding school?
He was at the school too.
Oh, okay, good.
Our first 2 years, we were together in the same student home.
Okay.
After I moved up to the next division, he and I were separate. So we had our first 2 years together, and in my next 8 years, we no longer lived together because we were in different divisions. So they had the junior division, the intermediate division, and the senior division. And we were 4 years apart in our age, which meant that we only got to live together for a short amount of time. But we stay in good contact. We see each other several times a year. He lives on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. I live in Los Angeles, but we still make time to be in each other's lives. And we get along like peas and carrots. He's super easy for me. We rarely argue. He's a good dude. I value, I appreciate, I admire, and I love my brother.
There's all kinds of bonds, right? There's a mother and a son bond. There's a best friend bond. There's a brotherly bond, and there's a trauma bond. And I'm going to guess that the combination of the brother bond and the trauma bond that you guys shared makes the bond that you have virtually unbreakable. Is that the strongest, most important relationship in your life, your brother? That's kind of an unfair question, and I didn't mean it to be.
Yeah, I think the most consistent and strongest bond that I have is with my brother, meaning that yes, that one's unbreakable. Yet ultimately, it isn't the relationship that I invest the most time in. And I think it's because partly I don't have to, because our bond is unbreakable, right? I've invested more time, energy, effort, care, resources, and energy into my relationships with other people. But I've always known, and I think my brother also knows too, my relationship with him will always be there. And his relationship with me will always be there. And so, how do I say it? It's supportive knowing that. Like, I think because we didn't grow up in the same household in our teenage years, there was never the picking and bickering.
Right. There
There was only admiration. And so I didn't go through those brotherly steps that other brothers go through, right? Leveraging, so let's see who's more powerful, who's got a stronger personality. We were raised in different student homes. What was very interesting is when we went to Milton Hershey School and he moved into the intermediate division, which is children between 5th and 8th grade, he went to the same student home that I went to. And so we still had the same people raising us. We just were not in the same student home at the same time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that has allowed us to have even a greater bond because we can share stories. Like when he's telling me about Mrs. Akins, I know Mrs. Akins. She was my house mother for 5th grade and 8th grade. She cooked us the same food. She had the same rules and regulations. So we grew up in the same environment, just at different times.
At what point in your story did you become interested in joining the military? Folks listening, at one point, Chris becomes a Navy SEAL in his story. And how did that come about and why?
What happened for me is it was my birthday. I turned 20 years old.
Oh, happy birthday back then.
And a buddy that I went to boarding school with, who's been a brother to me, his name was Marcus Riggleman. And his mom showed up at my house on my birthday when I turned 20. And she knocked on the door and she said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm chilling." And she goes, "You're going to come to live with me and my family." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, you're going to come live with me and my family. I have enough space for you. I've heard so many good things about you." And I thought, okay. And I grabbed a handful of my things, put them in the trunk of her car, and I went to live at her house in Kutztown, Pennsylvania. She and her husband at the time, they got an opportunity to buy a house right across from Kutztown University, right next to a building where she used to have her old restaurant, the Ruse Cafe. I enter into the home, we go down into the basement, and there's a biannual SEAL Team magazine. On the cover are 8 boat crews. A boat crew is 7 guys, telephone poles on their shoulders, running down the beach with these grimacing faces. And I remember looking at that and I thought, that's what I need. I need to be challenged. Within 3 months, I was out the door and off to SEAL training. And it was the perfect place for me because they did exactly that. They challenged me.
So you literally saw this on a magazine cover and said, "That's what I need. That's for me."
Yep.
Whoa.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, this is me right here. And I knew I was going to get stretched. I was going to get pushed.
Did you?
Oh, I did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day. When you walk into SEAL training and you get into the courtyard where we do PT, off to the left, there's a tall wall. And at the very top, it says the only easy day was yesterday. And they kept their promise.
Wow. How long were you Navy SEAL?
I went into SEAL training in 1991 and I got out of the SEAL teams in 1997.
Did you do things you can't talk about?
Did I do things that I can't talk about? I had at the time what's called a top secret clearance.
Oh, no. Does that mean that we're going to find classified documents in your house too?
No, we're not. What was great for me is I was in SEAL training in wartime. The Gulf War was ending. And I got out of the SEAL teams just as the next thing began. So it was a good experience.
My wife was in the Navy during the first one, the Navy Nurse Corps. So she was on the Comfort parked out there in the Persian Gulf for all of that.
Oh, she was. Okay, got it.
Yeah, she was out there for all that. So you're a Navy SEAL. Things are going great. Why'd you get out?
I'm the kind of learner that once I've learned something, I get bored.
Like, what's next?
What's next, right? And what happened for me is I wanted to transfer the SEAL Team 2 to be on the East Coast because that's where my family was.
What team were you?
I was the SEAL Team 5.
Okay.
West Coast. And a guy out there was willing to do a trade with me because he wanted to come to the West Coast. And his team, SEAL Team 2, was going to transfer his effects and pay for that to happen. And SEAL Team 5 said, if I want to go to SEAL Team 2, I have to come out of pocket.
How sweet.
And that really, at that moment, I thought, yeah, this is not the place for me because I believe in fair and equitable exchange.
And that was quite literally an exchange.
Yes, it was literally an exchange. And I didn't have a lot of things, but the principle of it bothered me enough for me to go, yeah. And at that time, they gave, in you're in the SEAL teams, they gave signing bonuses, right? If you sign up for another 4 years, you get a certain amount of money. So I was turning down a large amount of money. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go find something else to do that really interests me. And I decided to get out and go back into track and field because when I was an athlete in school, everything seemed to be working out really well for me.
Was it the structure?
I think the structure, but also the camaraderie. You know, the SEAL teams is fun in the sense of everything that we're doing, but at the same time, you know, you got to have thick skin to be in the SEAL teams,
right?
Because they talk a lot of trash, right? And in the SEAL teams, everything that you do requires perfection. If you make a mistake, if you have a foggy mind or a lapse in focus, what's going to happen? The chances are you could either hurt yourself severely or you could hurt someone else. And so, you know, you're under constant pressure of perfection. And when you make a mistake in the SEAL teams, it's very uncomfortable. Okay. Because at that time when I was in, hazing was still part of the deal. You, excuse my French, you fuck up, we're going to fuck you up.
Right.
And then, you know, there's some guys in the SEAL teams were there because they wanted to be challenged. Some guys in the SEAL teams were there because their dad was a mean motherfucker. Some guys were in the SEAL teams because they got their asses kicked and they were bullied when they were little kids. You know, some guys are in the SEAL teams because they're interested in weapons and skydiving and diving. You know, everybody has their different reasons. And you could tell that, you know, some guys are they're a little bit different. Their motivation was different. And when I was running, all I ever had were good experiences, right? Everybody was holding each other up, right? Positive reinforcement rather than cutting and shaming and demeaning, all those kinds of things.
Gotcha. Is that when you started training for the Olympics?
That's when I was focused on hoping to make it, run a time fast enough to get me to the Olympic trials. And looking back in retrospect, it was really a fantasy because the body that I had developed in the SEAL teams was not the kind of body built for speed, built for high level performance. It was built for high level performance in terms of endurance and grinding and gutting things out. So I lost a lot of my flexibility. My posture changed. I was top heavy now. My upper body was enormous. And it was just never going to happen unless I rewired my whole body. And I didn't even know that that was possible at the time.
We're probably going to jump around a little bit. But at some point, you decided to study traditional Chinese medical practices.
Yes.
How did that happen? What spurred that?
What spurred that is one of my buddies I went to Milton Hershey school with. His name is Mark Pershbalaja.
This school really had an impact on all facets of your life.
Oh, 1000%. And Mark sends me this email. He just spent 2 weeks with me. We drove out to see one of our buddies in Sedona, Arizona and go camping with him. And his name's Justin Harkins. And so we went out there. We had a good time. We drove back. Maybe we were out there for like 4 or 5 days. We drove back. He goes back to Philly, where he's living, and he sends me an email because on Good Morning America, he saw this guy that had 5 stretches that could change my life. And I thought when he sent me the email, I was like, I think he knew what pain I was under and the things that I was suffering from.
Physical pain?
Yeah, yes, joint
Okay.
pain.
Sorry.
And I think he thought, hey, I think this could be a really good solution. But at the time, I was, how do you say that? I was locked into the protective mode. And I took it as, why don't you take these stretches and stick them up your ass? Why don't you go change your life?
Yeah, why don't you mind your own business, bro?
Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, one of my clients, she was an esthetician, her name was Madi.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. What were you doing at the time that you had clients?
I was running a business where I was training people to be fit.
Okay. Now, one of your clients?
She comes in and she says, hey, I just saw this show. I just saw this guy in Good Morning America. And then I go, let me guess, he's got 5 stretches that'll change my life. And she goes, you saw the episode? And I was like, no, I didn't see the episode. But the one thing that I did know is I knew that no one was on Good Morning America 2 times in 2 weeks. Like Michael Jordan, Herschel Walker, these guys, they weren't on Good Morning America 2 times in 2 weeks. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start investigating. Let me put to the side my idea that things need to happen in 3s in order for me to make a move. I'm going to break this pattern. And I started investigating and I started tracking the guy down. It took me 6 months to get a hold of him. And then he agreed to see me and he worked on me and helped immediately get me out of the pain and discomfort that I was in. But at the same time, he was giving me education and teaching me the things that I could do for myself. So he was empowering me.
Was this Montauk Chia?
No. This
sorry.
was another guy, Bob. And I went in and started focusing intensely on the things that he was teaching me. And things started changing dramatically. The system that he had at the time was based on Chinese meridian theory. Yet he was very, how do I say it? He kept most of the information to himself, like this is generalizing, but most gurus keep the information to themselves, right? That's their leverage. Their position of power is their information.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point I thought, you know what? I'm going to go study traditional Chinese medicine and I'll get it straight from the source, from people who live in China, came to America and teach.
Gotcha.
That was the catalyst for me. I wasn't getting the information that I needed from the source that began to teach me. So I decided to take things into my own hand.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors. Let's get back into it.
So the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine and also Yosan University, those are in America?
Yeah, one is in San Diego and the other one is in Los Angeles.
Okay, cool. What kind of knowledge do you think you gained from those 2 institutions?
The most important thing that I got from those schools was the basics. What I mean by that is the concept of yin energy, feminine energy, and yang energy, masculine energy, and understanding the channels of energy, where they moved in the body. And that gave me a map that I could lay over any human's body to begin to understand why they were suffering from what they were suffering from.
It helped you understand how to assess what the problem even is for people?
Yeah, to help me to assess and also educate, right? Because when people are suffering needlessly from debilitating levels of unresolved stress, they need answers. They need education. It needs to make simple sense. And the thing about Chinese medicine is it's based on logic. 2 + 2 = 4, 3 + 3 = 6. And by having a logic-based system, I was able to lay that map over top of their body. Imagine they're pointing to this part that already is informing me which aspect of their physiology and their energy is under deep amounts of stress. And then I could teach them how to resolve that on their own.
Is this particular arm of Chinese medicine focused on stress?
No.
Okay.
The Chinese don't talk about things in terms of stress. They talk about things in terms of stagnation or flow. meaning something is moving or something is stuck. I speak about the work in terms of stress because stress is a concept that all humans can understand. And so I've had to figure out, how do you communicate to the average human in terms of what the average human already understands? And every human on the planet at a certain age understands the word stress and what it implies. And so I had to take a very large amount of complex information and distill it down so it would be absorbable, understandable, and allow me to build enough rapport where someone would take a risk that was outside of their comfort zone and take heartfelt action to their own benefit. And so I had to simplify all of it to make complete sense, whether I was talking to a Western MD, whether I was talking to an acupuncturist, whether I was communicating with a single mom of 5, or whether I was talking to a 9-year-old boy. I had to be able to distill this down to make simple sense.
Why is that so important to you?
Well, it's important to me because I want people to have the opportunity to feel good in the places where they feel bad, right? Because when you feel good, you do good. When you feel bad, you do bad.
Sure, I get that. And I want everybody to have a great day. But why is it a passion of yours, so much so that you're studying all this medicine and all these different understandings? And as far as I understand, you're even pursuing a master's and a doctorate in these traditional Chinese medicines. Why is it a passion for you to change these people's lives, to make a difference?
Because I feel dutiful. Okay, so there's also duty attached to that. When you're someone who was suffering from debilitating amounts of stress, unresolved, and you have a large bank account of unresolved lifetime accumulated stress plus childhood trauma, and then professional stressors or traumas, and you're suffering needlessly, to me, the prudent thing is to take action, right? When other people were in church listening about the stories about Jesus, the boarding school that I went to, we were always, every year, being refed the same biography of Milton Hershey, the man who started Milton Hershey School and owned Hershey Foods Incorporated. I had mentors. They might have been dead, but to me, they were mentors because they were inspiring me to think about reality in a way that got me to ask some very simple questions. When I was hearing the story of Jesus, I was always asking myself, what could I do that would be as impactful? When I continued to hear the story of Milton Hershey and his creation of Milton Hershey School while I was at that institution, I was always asking myself, what could I do that would be as impactful as Milton Hershey? And I was raised under the golden rule, and we had a pledge, a school pledge that said, I will do everything that I can to be mentally awake, physically strong, and morally straight. And I will do everything that I can to help my brothers live in such a fashion as well. And this is the best duty that I can give to myself, my family, my country. When you're young and you read a school pledge like that every day, you get to drop into a sense of duty and service. And I started that pledge when I was 7 years old and mixed that in with going to a non-denominational church where they read passages from the Bible that seemed logical and sensible. God helps those who help themselves. Knock on the door and it shall be open. And these things were repeated again and again and again and again. And they began to form my sense and orientation towards spiritual principle. And then when I had my moment and my awakening and I got out of the hell that I was in, at that moment, I realized the prudent thing to do would to offer and create profound impact for others. Because if I was going through all of that and I was what people would consider successful by becoming a Navy SEAL, by going to medical school, by training for the Olympic trials, always pushing the edge, imagine all the other people that were suffering the same way that I was. And I knew that people had been going through things that I had gone through because I was always very socialized, right? When you go to boarding school, the one thing you get is you get socialized. And I was always interested in people. And I was always curious. I was always asking questions. And then that moment for me arrived. And my teacher was pain and loss. And by the time I was 29, I had endured as much pain and as much loss as any human that ever walked the planet. And then when I got out of that hell and I could turn that into a mission, it took me about 0.2 seconds to turn left.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah. And just so you know, I wasn't the person when I was in the SEAL teams waking up thinking like, oh, I want to go into the world and I want to change the world. That was not happening at all. I was focused on getting recognition for who I was because I was thinking that the outer recognition was going to prove that I had value. I put enough strain and stress and tension and distortion into my body that there was no way that that was ever going to happen. And so I had to make a choice, and my choice was to reach out and ask for help.
What is true body intelligence?
True body intelligence. It's true.
Oh, okay, great. We're off to a good start.
In the SEAL teams, we have north and then we have true north. And so if we get dropped into a very dense jungle, we got to be able to get from point A to point B. And the way we do that is through map and compass training, right? So north and true north to me, they have meaning. I was trained in that. And so when I was going to choose something that made sense to me, the word true had to be a part of it. And another reason is because the lungs in Chinese medicine are associated with truth. And the lungs are what you would call part of the physical intuitive body. And through my discoveries and investigation and spending time with humans, what I figured out is that the body always tells the truth and the mind will lie 1,000 lies. It'll tell itself whatever it needs to in order to feel safe. And so then I couldn't trust the stories that people were telling me, but I could trust the information that the body was giving me. And so now we added body, true body intelligence. Well, here's the wonderful thing. As you remove tension and stress and distortion from the physical body, you know what happens? The body becomes more intelligent. When the body becomes more intelligent, the emotions become more intelligent. When emotions become more intelligent, the spirit becomes more intelligent. When the spirit becomes more intelligent, the mind becomes more intelligent. And so I wanted to come up with a name that spoke to what the end result was. You get a true, intelligent body if you do the work that I'm teaching you.
So is that the name of your program?
Yeah, it's called True Body Intelligence. My private program is called, you'll love this, Rational Intimate Transfiguration. Why? Because
why?
it's rational. It's super intimate. And what are we doing? We're doing transfiguration. We're changing your actual physical form.
Wow. Check you out, bro. Damn.
Yeah.
Well, since I'm asking you, what is this and what is that? What is Free for Life?
Oh, Free for Life. Now that
is something.
It's a statement, yet it's also a question. It's a driver. It's a mission. It's a purpose. It's a story. It's a goal. It's a path. It's a journey, right? Free for Life is the focus of my work. The people that I work with, whether they're students of mine and I teach them to work with other people and help them achieve freedom for life, or it's people that I work with privately who are suffering from some level of discomfort, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, energetic, they get the opportunity to get on that free for life pathway. And once you achieve a certain state of homeostasis, tension and distortion and stress, they get processed through your mind, your body, and your nervous system and your emotions in a completely different fashion. And when you're free for life, you get to make choices on your own orientations to religion. Who am I in relationship to sexuality? Who am I in relationship to education? Who am I in relationship to communication? You get to discover who it is you are, as opposed to employing your mother and father's limiting beliefs, inner insecurities, inner deficiencies, and fears. And now once you're free of that, you get to choose what's right for you, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. and you get to unplug from the stress matrix. And as soon as you unplug from the stress matrix, you now are in the world, but you're no longer of the world. You get to see things for exactly what they are. You add nothing, you take nothing away. You arrest yourself from excessive states of judgment, criticism, disapproval, and an overly moralizing position over yourself or over others. Imagine what it would be like for you if you woke up and you got to quiet the excessive inner critic that went to sleep. Imagine what it would be like if you were in debilitating back discomfort for 15 years and you woke up the next morning and that was gone. Imagine if your foggy mind turned into supreme clarity, or your high level debilitating anxiety turned into excitable, free, passionate emotions. Imagine if your energy was continuously abundant, regardless of the quality and or the amount of sleep you got.
It sounds like, and since you brought up the Matrix, it sounds like a scene in the Matrix where I believe it was the Oracle said, "Don't try to bend the spoon, only realize the truth that there is no spoon." And I know that you know it because you mouthed those words with me as I was saying it.
Yes.
So that's what it sounds like to me, that you're trying to help people understand, for lack of a better phraseology, a higher plane of enlightenment.
Yeah. I mean, whenever you think a thought over and over and over again, you create a belief. And that belief is either true or it's false from a subjective perspective. Okay. But the reality is, whatever your beliefs are, they're true to you, and you will produce outcomes based on those beliefs. And so the prudent thing would be to create a pattern interrupt so that you are no longer projecting those beliefs, and the universe is no longer reflecting back to you that those false beliefs have value. Because whatever you think, whatever you feel, whatever you choose to perceive, it's having a continuous and consistent effect on you, on your body, on your mind, on your energy, on your moods. If we can get your mind, body, and nervous system into a state of neutrality, you add nothing, you take nothing away, you simply see things for what they are. And you're able to make good decisions to your own benefit and take heartfelt action to support and produce the things that you love, that you're passionate about. And when people are in pain, their pain is indicating to them that they have a limiting belief.
Free for Life is also a book. Is that right?
Yes, Free for Life is a book. I am the author.
You are the author of the book, Free for Life. What's in the book, man?
What's in the book is, the first third is my story. The second third is my philosophy. And the last third is about the systems that I've been co-creating and producing and generating that are to the benefit of the reader or listener if they get my book in an audio form. It's for them. Hopefully it inspires someone to take action to their own benefit on something that they know is expressing itself in a way that's uncomfortable and that they're aware of is false.
Well, the rule of three really is important to you. You mentioned it earlier casually, but wow, it even shows up in your book. This third, that third, the other third.
Yes.
Check you out.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Chris, I hate to do this, but we're nearing the end here, man.
Okay.
I feel like I could talk to you forever.
I could talk to you forever too. You ask really great questions.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that.
And you hold really good neutral space.
What does that mean?
I mean, you know, when someone is deep and they're interested and they care, they ask the kinds of questions that other people don't ask because they're willing to take a risk. I think the greatest form of care are people who are willing to take risk to your own benefit. And someone who asks deeper questions is taking more risk, which means they're going to get more out of me. And in the process, they're going to give me the opportunity to learn something about myself.
Well, that might be the nicest compliment I've had so far during this whole thing. And it's been over 350 episodes. So thank you very much, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That means the world to me.
Thank you.
Chris, this is a dumb question because I have a feeling I know what the answer is. Is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about specifically here today? Did I miss anything?
Give me a second. Yeah, I'm going to say this. For the listeners, whatever is in your body is in your life. Here's what I mean by that. If you have an aspect of your life that you're unsatisfied with, whether it's financially, whether it's emotionally, whether it's sexually, whether it's spiritually, whether it's physically or structurally, there's an aspect in your body that is distorted and fragmented. And if you solve that, the thing in your life will change simultaneously in a relative and reflective manner. That's what the listeners need to know. Whatever's in your body is in your life. Whatever's in your life is in your body. No one can control the outside world around them. There's too many people. It takes too much energy. But the one thing that you can control is what kind of practices you choose to use with your body. And if you're willing to do a little bit of investigation, put in a little bit of effort, spend some resource into time and energy and effort, your outer life is going to be the life that you know you can experience, feel, achieve, and enjoy.
Could not be better words to go out on. Chris Maher.
I know what you forgot to ask me. I looked through your webpage, right? And I'm also a musician.
What?
Yes.
Oh,
because I saw that you have a lot of musicians and actors and people, artists that you interview. And I thought I would tell you, yes, I'm also a songwriter, a singer.
Well, I guess we know one of the things we're talking about when you come back in a few months.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, man, how that all transpired. And
well, if you know anything about me after this hour, you know that I love a great story. I love a fascinating story. Chris Maher, tell everybody where they can find you on everywhere. Where can they go, man? Where can they buy the book? Where can they find more about you?
Again, I'm Christopher Lee Maher. My book is Free for Life. You can locate that on Amazon, and you can locate that on my website in a couple of weeks. But if you want the audio version, you can go to my website. My website is True Body Intelligence. I did the website in sort of like a cryptic fashion. The point was for you to go to support@truebodyintelligence.com and email me. And when you email me, Christina, my assistant, she will send you a one sheet that will allow you to learn how to get in contact with me. And if you take the time to read the book, I will take the time to set some time aside to get on the phone with you and help you and give you some direction that I think will be beneficial for you.
That is fan-freaking-tastic. Christopher Lee, I forgot to say the Lee this whole time. Christopher Lee Maher, you have a great rest of your weekend, man. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic and hopefully stress-free schedule to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street, man. I really appreciate it.
Dude, it was great. It was an awesome experience. Like I said, you have a really good grounded vibe, and emotionally, I felt valued. Mentally, I felt valued. Spiritually, I felt valued. And it was a really great life experience for me. So thank you so much.
Dude, you're going to make me cry, man. Thank you, dude. You have a great rest of your week. And I am going to reach out. We're going to do this again. This was a blast. And I can't wait to find out more about your musical side, man.
Okay, awesome.
All right, you take it easy.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye. Opening music is the song FSP Theme, written, performed, and provided by Ambush Vin. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jax Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend. Subscribe and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.